Seven Blue Skies channel brings you Paranormal, Book 2, Part 2, Legend of the Caller, by Dr. Ahmed Khalid Tawfiq. 4. Other Sick People. And now, you must confess that I have unusually strong nerves, and that my faith in science is unshaken because, simply, after hearing what I heard and seeing what I saw, I was unmoved. I went back home to sleep. I can't imagine how foolish I was in those days. The next morning, I did not forget to pass by my brother's place to ask his wife about his condition. Her face brightened, and she told me, "Thank God." "He did not wake up during the night?" I asked. "The caller called him a few times," she replied, "so he would turn over in bed, but he didn't get up." "Excellent." With a distracted look, she asked me, "Why don't you give him that medicine, the curing injection, every night?" Not such a bad idea, but it's not the solution at all. It's unthinkable for a human to spend their whole life under the influence of phenobarbital so as not to hear the voice of the caller. Not to mention that it's a crime. A crime to push a human being into addiction just to be reassured about his safety. But what can we do to keep him from escaping? I smiled in pity, then told her goodbye and left. As expected, the news of my return to the village had spread like wildfire through kindling, and immediately the small yard at our home filled up with the villagers who came wearing their pain on their shirt sleeves, the mothers bringing their children still suffering from diarrhea, and dramatic teenagers losing sleep over the freckles on their cheeks. Really, every creature in the village had apparently searched his body for some problem justifying his coming to me for a checkup. And, of course, I did not complain, though I wasn't paid a penny, because it was the villagers' unspoken right and my obligation. I was reminded of my youth as a new doctor in a rural clinic. And in the room to the right of the entrance of our home, I prepared a small, makeshift clinic and started practicing the secrets of my noble profession. All the while, my sister brought rounds of tea to select people amongst these visitors. And in the mid-afternoon, the workload subsided and I finished up. Thus, I planned to go up to my room to rest before going to my brother Rida's place that night. The door opened, and 3 men entered, seeming hesitant. The eldest of them told me, "We need you for a home visit, doctor." I smiled but shook my head, saying, "Could we delay that until this evening, because I'm—" "Please," he said quickly, in a commanding voice, while the others exchanged secretive looks. These men were hiding something fishy. And, just like in the movies, it had to be that one of them had gotten shot in a fight with the police. But this was not a movie, so I tried to avoid the situation, saying, "You can visit the village clinic." "Name your price," came the reply. They were really insistent. Anyway, Sharia farmers are known to be peaceful and generous, and there was no use in refusing to see their patient as they insisted, like death itself. And I don't like to fight, at least not with the people of my village. "Let's go then," I said, and I grabbed my medical bag and went out with them. "Please, come in, doctor." A veiled woman hid her face with her black scarf, and a small group of men sat, silent and sullen, smoking and exchanging meaningful looks. The same humble room design as in my home, and the same carefree ducks playing. Beyond the entrance, a rather stinky passage led to a small room with wicker furniture, and on the floor a young man lay staring with unblinking eyes at the ceiling. Glancing at the young man, I asked, "Is he sick?" No one among them replied, showing the stupidity of my question, so I decided to make matters worse with an even more idiotic question. "What's wrong with him?" "As you can see," someone said. "How long?" I asked. "A week." I bent down over him, but I was unable to examine him like this. Thus I kneeled next to him and began trying to arouse him, but without success. The same cursed symptoms. Is it a plague that has ravaged the village? Reaching for his wrist in order to take his pulse, I found something terrible. A rope around his wrists, tying him to a wooden stake in the floor. They had tied up the young man like a predator to prevent his escape. And what an idea! Lifting my eyes to the men standing around me, I asked, Was he called by the caller?" They exchanged knowing looks, and then the eldest of them said smugly, "His mother said so, that he heard her." "Well then, why did you call me?" "To prove it or deny it." "Prove it? And how exactly would I prove it when I myself didn't believe it for a moment? And in which scientific journal can one find a description of the symptoms of the choler disease?" I regarded the restrained young man. It really is a heinous myth, and his being tied up made it even more frightening. The thought of Ulysses' journey sprang to my mind. I thought of how he passed by the island of Sirens, who were known to sing seducing songs to the sailors, causing them to throw themselves into the water, only to drown. Ulysses ordered his sailors to place wax to their ears, and had himself tied to the mast of the ship to avoid hearing their tempting songs. Mythical human behavior really does resemble the villagers' behavior in Shar-Ea Governorate. But I digress. I continued examining the patient, lifting his galabeah to check his abdomen, where I found something remarkable: evidence of well-healed fang marks in the infraumbilical skin. And here I started understanding. I asked the men thoughtfully, "Does he drink?" "No, he totally refuses water." "Then bring me some water," I instructed. They ran quickly to bring me a clay jug of water. One of them handed it to me, doubtful and surprised that I was eager to drink in these circumstances. Taking the udla, I brought it near the patient's face and started pouring the water as he regarded me with fear in his eyes. And as I had expected, he grimaced with a terrified look in his eyes and a silent scream on his lips. He sat up suddenly and started moaning and howling like a wounded wolf. I took the udla away and began calming him down. And then I stood up, silently gathered my things, and motioned for the eldest of men to follow me outside. And there, in front of all standing there, I said to him, "This is not a case of the choler." "Well then, what is it?" "He is infected with a dog disease," I replied. "Dog?" "Yes," I explained. "A rabid animal bit him in the abdomen a few days ago." "That didn't happen," he said. "Yeah, it actually did," I said. "And maybe he just ignored it and did not take the vaccine. And now he is in the late stages of the disease." "And the water thing?" he asked. I explained. In the old days, this disease was called hydrophobia, because the infected patient goes mad from the sound or sight of water. The infection causes intense spasms in the throat when a person tries to swallow. Even taking in air and the thought of swallowing can cause the spasms, making it appear that the patient is afraid of water. I then lit a cigarette, feeling proud of myself, and continued, "And this delirium is a symptom of brain inflammation." It seemed he hadn't understood a word of what I said, and he didn't care to understand. All he wanted to know was what to do. "He has to be moved immediately to one of the fever hospitals in Zagazit." "But," he protested, "immediately. His chance of survival is less than 0.5%, but we have to try." "But—" "Immediately," I said again. "This kid's life is in your hands now." Rudely challenging me, one of them said, "But his mom heard the caller, doctor." I rounded on him and said bitterly, "If you believe in the existence of the caller, that's your business. But this kid has rabies. Do you understand? He won't live to see next Friday's prayer." "And what to do?" one of them asked. "I told you, the fever hospital." An intense, idiotic argument took place on the side. It was clear that they would not take him anyway, and that I would have to report them to the police for keeping a critically ill patient. But, deep down, I simply wanted to find an explanation for my brother's case just as easily. I knew no one had survived rabies in the history of medicine up until today, but the urge to find a solution for my brother's problem persisted. The argument ended, and the oldest of the men approached me and shook my hand firmly, saying, "Thank you, doctor. And now, how much do I owe you?" I asked for a crazy number, as I considered it my duty to avenge these idiots. Yet he did pay it willingly, and ordered one of them to take me back home. And before I left, he told me, "I advise you to believe in the caller. because she only calls those who don't believe in her existence. 5. Dr. Awesome. The time was nearing 7 p.m. as I drove to the central medical unit in my village. It was a run-down old building, its walls invaded by mold. One of hundreds of similar T-shaped buildings in this sweet countryside, and it presented the local farmers with limited services. No employees or even the unit guard was present, so I went up the broken stairs to the upper floor, to the doctor's residency, and knocked politely. "One moment, please." I heard his footsteps inside, and then the opening of an iron lock. And I saw a doctor's face lit by the kerosene lantern he carried. He was a young man in his mid-30s, but his hair was almost gone, and he wore thick eyeglasses, which made his eyes look smaller and narrower than they actually were, and his beard was half-grown. "Yes?" I introduced myself to him. He smiled in a friendly way and invited me in, exclaiming, "Now I know why I haven't seen a single patient today." And he led me into a clean room with a bed, next to which were stacked some books and magazines, as well as a gas burner, on top of which was a boiling teapot. And on the wall, a small lizard moved suddenly, disturbed by our voices. It seemed that the doctor had been reading in bed when I came up. With some embarrassment, he tidied the bed a bit to allow me to sit there, and then he added more tea to the kettle, took off his slippers, and sat cross-legged next to me on the bed. He cursed the clinic workers with the worst kind of swear words, for a reason I didn't understand. Basically, his reception of me was as friendly as he could muster. He told me, "I'm Dr. Asim Fathi. This is my 3rd year in this village. I've heard a lot about you, Dr. Rifat." I shook my head humbly and said, "I've come to consult you in a small matter." He laughed cheerfully. "The great professor asks for my consultation? What a lucky guy I am." But I said seriously, "This is no laughing matter." "And what is it then?" I gave him the background history on the dog bite patient and his family's stance on it. And then I asked, "What's the protocol here in such a case?" He stood up, and into 2 cups he poured the tea, which made that bubbling sound so sweet to the soul. "How many spoons of sugar?" he asked. 2? "Sure," I said. "I was saying," he continued, "that the protocol is to report it to the police central, and the patient should be moved to a fever hospital, and a police report should be made against his family. That's the best solution, but—" "But what?" I asked. He gave me a sharp look and said in undertones, "Do you actually expect any results from this? A case of end-stage rabies?" "What are you implying?" I asked. "I mean that by doing so, you'll cause endless problems for his family. They're suffering enough already." "And leave him to die?" He replied, "He's going to die either way. And you are, as they say, a son of this village, but don't realize it." He handed me the cup of tea and sighed, continuing, "Here in the countryside, one must be flexible. This village has its own unwritten laws." I contemplated the room as I thought, "This man speaks rather logically, but my problem still remains." Sipping my tea, I asked him, "Have you heard of the caller?" He nodded, and the ghost of a smile played on his mouth. I asked again, "Have you seen similar cases?" His smile widened, and he rose and went to a small wooden chair next to the bed. From the chair stacked with books and papers, he brought a tattered notebook and returned to the bed, saying, "I'm about to show you something no one has seen before." "What is it?" I asked. "These are my daily clinic notes," he said as he flipped through the pages, filled with small but tidy handwriting. Pages of irrelevant observations, sketches of girls' faces, some poetry, and thoughts on his pain, torture, and regret, about a lot of things about which I couldn't care less. What a mess! But he could not resist reading his writings aloud to my old, exhausted ears, for fate had thrown him a listener here at 8 p.m., and he would not miss the chance. But fortunately, he didn't regale me with any of these musings. Instead, he flipped the notebook open to a few pages in the middle and started reading, glancing at me occasionally as he read. In October 1961, El-Zogbi Farhad, a 36-year-old farmer, presented with a strange illness. Symptoms: a state of confusion, disorientation, decreased food and fluid intake, muteness. Exam: vital signs intact, neurologically intact, no evidence of any drugs. Labs: blood sugar, kidney function, cerebrospinal fluid, all within normal limits. History: the patient's family claims they heard a woman calling the patient by name minutes before the patient developed symptoms. And in November, the family members awoke and discovered the patient was missing from home and nowhere to be found. Dr. Awesome then flipped to another page, took a sip of tea, and went on reading. In February 62, the story repeats itself with Saeed Gabber, a 25-year-old construction worker. Same symptoms and history, basically. March 62, a similar incident happens to Ibrahim El-Sa'a, a teenager, 13 years old. And in April 62, Rida Ismail, a 34-year-old farmer, currently in a catatonic state, having not yet gone missing. In each case, the patient's family mentioned the name the caller. So, what is the caller? He continued reading. The caller is one of the terrifying characters in folkloric literature, and by all descriptions, she is a ghoul who takes the shape of a pretty girl and roams the dark fields at night. She repeatedly calls out a specific young man by name, and as soon as the guy hears it, he runs toward her call, in spite of his family's protests. And when he finds her and throws himself into her hug, she turns into a huge ghoul who devours him down to the last bone. He went on. There's a lot of evidence pointing to the existence of such a creature. Muhammad Amin, a 50-year-old farmer, has seen a tall woman walking slowly in his fields at night and calling, "Zogbi, Zogbi," and he swears she was glowing, a light green color. But of course, he dared not go towards her. Instead, he went home, obviously, to take cover under blankets. And then there's Sayed El-Sharawi, the village grocer, who, upon his return one night, saw a beautiful girl walking on the surface of the lake and not drowning. Ahmed Abbas heard the sound of a woman calling repeatedly, "Ibrahim, Ibrahim," and he rushed over to see what was happening, and found a woman standing in the field alone. And when he went towards her to ask what she wanted from Ibrahim, she turned to him slowly, and he says he saw the most beautiful face he has seen in his life. Her pupils were blood red. He became dizzy and fainted upon seeing this horrible thing, and only regained consciousness as his brother-in-law was carrying him home. A child, Subhi Mahmoud, 9 years old, saw a woman crossing his father's field at night, in the moonlight, without leaving a shadow. Sarcastically, I said here, "What an observant kid." But Dr. Awesome did not seem to notice my sarcasm and went on reading. In all cases, there were 2 calls. The first one leads the patient into a state of confusion and decreased awareness, and the second is the final, after which the patient disappears. The 2 calls are separated by 1 to 2 weeks. Some villagers tie the patient up to prevent him from disappearing, and some of them guard the patient closely. But there is a moment of negligence or sleep which always happens, and then it's all over, and the called one escapes. No one ever tried to chase down the owner of this voice? I asked. Of course not, because the myth is alive to them, and they are sure that whoever prevents the caller from her game will be her next prey. He then finished his cup of tea and flipped the page, saying, "There are several possibilities explaining this. The first possibility is that the caller is a real creature." "Unacceptable," I said firmly. Putting the cup aside and changing his seated position, he replied, "I agree, but it's the only possibility after eliminating all other possibilities, and it's silly, as you can see. The second possibility is that it's some kind of unknown plague which has invaded the village, its symptoms totally psychological, much like the Kuru disease. And in this case, the matter requires reporting to those more capable than us, like the World Health Organization or NIMRU." The third possibility is a shared hallucination that struck them all, which is very distant and unlikely possibility, but still better than the fourth. The fourth possibility is that several murders have been committed under the cover of this mythical image, and that there's a genius killer who carried out his crimes beyond the circle of suspicion, so that no one would doubt the caller is real. I yawned and said to him, "You've done well documenting the facts, but I think the four possibilities are all imaginary and contradictory." But he went on. "The fifth possibility is that each case has a separate explanation. For example, the case you saw today was a rabid patient. Maybe the other patients were suffering something similar which I missed." I looked at my watch. It was exactly 9 p.m., and I remembered my brother. Only one thought came to my mind: to go to him and tie him to the bed, and thereby comfort myself about what could happen. Dr. Awesom's statement of the information was organized and well done, but he didn't give me much. I looked at the books he kept on the chair next to his bed. What a weird collection. The book My Struggle by Hitler, some books by Nietzsche, a collection of science fiction novels and some medical volumes, mostly on pharmacology, and finally 4 books of poetry. I looked at him and said, "Thanks for the information and your hospitality. I have to go." "But we haven't really talked yet," he protested. "Later," I said. "I've had a long day." "Yes," he said, "I understand and am sorry to hear it." "Okay, well, anyway, you'll be seeing a lot of me here." "How long are you staying?" he asked. "I don't actually know," I replied, and I rubbed my tired forehead. It seemed surreal that this was only my 3rd day in the village. It felt more like a century. Exhausted, I told him, "My vacation from the university is supposed to be 2 weeks, but I plan to stay here until I know everything about my..." But before I could tell him about my brother's case, there came an insistent knock at the door. He left me and went to open the door, carrying the kerosene lantern. Thus I stayed alone in the dark, listening to a whispered conversation between him and someone else, probably one of the clinic nurses or an employee who had returned from an errand outside. After a minute, he came back to me, the lamp throwing scary shadows on his face, and he said, "That was Mustafa, the clinic guard. He was apologizing for having to go into the village, as the people called him to join a search party with them." "Another disappearance?" I asked quickly. "Indeed," he replied, "and you know him well." My brother Rida? Has it happened? But Dr. Awesome does not know his relationship with me, and he never made the connection between my name, Rifat Ismail, and Rida Ismail. Well then, who is the missing person whom I know well? "Remember the kid with rabies you saw earlier today?" "Of course." "Well," he said, "he has followed the voice of the caller just an hour ago." End of Part 2. Thanks for watching. Please let us know what you think in the comments section below. And now, for our loyal viewers who stayed until the end, check out this bonus literary excerpt. Cheers!